I say at the start of the show, we have a guest in studio, always one of my favorite things, guest in studio. And I really just met her through a mutual friend. And her activities are kind of they play well with the point I make often about America. The American left gets political power by telling the American people that their fellow citizens will never help them by pitting Americans against each other, putting Americans into silos based on race, ethnicity, national origin, gender, and the constant effort of the American left is to divide Americans and to convince Americans that your fellow Americans won't help you, nobody's going to help you, and that what you really need is more government, bigger government, more government control of everything, and this somehow is the only path toward having America solve the problems facing us. What I always tell you is America is overflowing with good, noble, moral people who do the right thing all the time when no one's looking, who are generous, who are kind-hearted, who do things they don't have to do in their lives. They could just live their private lives, go to work, come home, take care of the kids, pay the mortgage, and march on the next day. But America is filled in the millions of people who are good, noble people who work very hard to help other people who are just stumbling and struggling in life, to help America's culture and society. And who we have joining us today is one of those people, Toni Brinker. So, Toni, welcome to my show.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. Okay, well, I mentioned before we got on air, you sent me a lot of information. And so I want to first have you just in a broad way tell our listeners about listeners, we're going to hear about her philanthropy. That's what I want her to start with. But just basically, the organization you founded that is now, you're now calling it One Community USA. But I'd love you to just tell the overarching view. Why did you get started doing this?
I'll go back to the beginning. That was in 2014. I happened to have been in New York on a very small street, and I saw TV cameras at either end of the street. At about 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm wondering why people are going up and down the street marching. And in 14, I had never heard, "What do you want? Dead cops. When do you want them? Right now." Oh. So I actually, that was my exact reaction. It was like, good grief, this can't possibly be true. I went, turned on the TV, and sure enough, that is what was being broadcasted. I was in New York now, mind you. I called our mayor and our police chief, called the chief first, and I said to him, his name is David Brown, I said, "Chief, I'm up here in New York. This makes no sense to me. People who live in this community, why is this happening? And oh, by the way, Chief, you're a great chief of police of a great city and a great state. Even though this is New York, what are you going to do?" And he said, "What am I going to do?" And I said, "Sure, I'm telling you that there's a problem." I said, "I understand we've had Trayvon Martin, and I understand that we've had 5 months of Ferguson and all of the residual effects on that. But Chief, you need to get up here and do something about it, because I think this is going to spread all over the United States." And again, he asked me what I was going to do, and I went, "Oh, Chief, have no idea. I'll call you back." So I called the mayor, said, "Mayor, Toni Brinker, I'm up here," recited the whole thing. He said, "Well, what are you going to do?" It's like, "Did you just talk to the police chief?" "Nope." And I said, "I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'll call you back." So that is the genesis. It was realizing that we had a problem in the United States, and me, a very naive person at that point in my life, thought, I've got to figure out what's going on. So I spent the next 2.5 years circling the country, and that means by going to underserved communities, visiting prisons, visiting with police departments, visiting all the what you would call ghettos that I could find, but visiting with people of affluence and also visiting with people who have lived in underserved communities. The one thing that I found is that at this point in time in 2014 now through 16, that there was an uneasiness in the country, and that racial issues were beginning to really take a stronghold, and that people did not feel safe. They did not feel safe not only in their city but also on their streets. And I knew that this as a whole was going to be pulling our great country apart. That's when I made the decision, I've got to do something.
Okay, I like that background. I'm going to quick share with our listeners because we're going to be playing a few clips so you can see more firsthand of what her organization does. But Toni Brinker founded in 2015 Operation Blue Shield, now doing business as One Community USA. It's a 501c3. It's basically designed to create or to help to create unity in communities, building bridges of trust between ordinary citizens and law enforcement and first responders. And they, all these great words that last night I started researching this online. These just wonderful, beautiful thoughts. But, I was emailing Toni late saying, but tell me something specific. Like, what have you been doing? And honestly, my inbox was loaded with specific things this morning. So now I'm going to share some of them with you because everyone, I think, wants unity and they don't want to think our country is so divided and they don't want to think that there's no path forward. But your organization is trying to really do something specific. I'm going to hit some of those specifics in a moment. But this whole idea of the issues in which you can help to create sustainable economic opportunities, better life for people, helping people getting out of prisons, building neighborhoods of opportunity. These are all ways to go something beyond just lamenting the difficulties in America. And so I want to start with one clip. And this one is, I'm going to start with the very first one, Matt. The very first one I sent you is a clip related to one thing that Toni Brinker's organization does.
In recent months, some have lost faith and trust in those who protect us. Frustration has blurred our vision, but Americans know a thing or two about uniting for the greater good. Stand united with us to facilitate the kinds of positive dialogue that lead to unified solutions.
I'm all in.
I'm all in.
I'm all in.
We're all in.
Join us.
This time, it's for all of us.
You recognize that voice? That's
No,
Lee
actually.
Majors.
Oh, I did not. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also saw that had the ribbon. You brought the ribbon with you. What does the ribbon symbolize? Is part of what you're doing?
So the ribbon actually is a unity ribbon, and we wrap. Again, we do things on the street, but the first thing you have to do is you have to bring both sides together. You can't create a safe neighborhood that becomes secure, that becomes a thriving neighborhood where people have jobs, health care, and all. You have to bring two people together. The voices have to be heard, and we also have to have some value, because my outlook on life is very different than yours. It's also very different than someone who was born and raised in an underserved community. So the first thing to do is bring in the unity. Colors mean everything. Swags are good. Get gadgets and gadgets and things like that. But you take a look at the yellow. The yellow in this ribbon represents community. That's me. That's you. The blue on either side represents a first responder that is protecting us. But in the country today, what we have forgotten is that people who are first responders, again, this is law enforcement, sheriffs, mayors, city council people, doctors, nurses, teachers are first responders, and even children who are in schools when there is a disaster become first responders helping their friends. We all need to remember first responders can operate in the blue, but they're also citizens. Citizens at one point in their life become a first responder as well. So if people can just realize based on a circumstance and a day in their life, they may walk in the same shoes of the man who puts on the uniform to come into their neighborhood to keep it safe.
Love that. Matt, the next clip I want to play, this is the Irving Police Department, which Irving is a community right around here. Irving Police Department Black History Month celebration little clip. I want to play that.
It's a very diverse community that has embraced all races.
As part of that recognition of diversity, people are at the Kroger on Beltline Road for the Irving Police Department's Black History Month celebration.
An opportunity for us to come together as a community, as a city, as a police department, and truly celebrate what our connection is with our African American community. And really, foundationally, that starts with our Shop Talk program.
Barbershops played a vital role in the cultural and economic development of African American communities.
And building on that role, Irving Police Officer John Plunkett led the way in establishing Shop Talk back in 2016. The program provides a chance for officers to build relationships and have candid conversations.
And the whole goal of this here is to build that unity, build a unity in the community between the police and the African American community.
Okay, so tell me what Shop Talk is.
Shop Talk is a program that focuses again in the African American community. What we do is we are supporting African American owned businesses. So anytime you can go into a community and help that business, first of all, be safe so that they have an opportunity to expand, and then offer employment to people who live in the community, you raise the boat for everyone. The only way you can do that, though, is to bring in the side that will help with creating safety, and that is our first responders that you saw in the clip. So if I have an ordinary citizen, maybe it's a business owner working hand in glove with the law enforcement department, you're creating this bond of unity. But it's actionable bond. We have events. We actually work with people where we will have, say, a barbershop owner who we become in this particular program, which again is what we call boots on the ground. He then becomes an ambassador in his community. He gets other people involved. During the height of COVID, our barbershop owners reached out to us and said, Mrs. Brinker, we've got people in our neighborhood who need help. And I said, help? I mean, you have no job, you have no money coming in, and there are people, he said, worse off than we are. And I said, my gosh, please tell me about it. He said, they don't have food. We have friends who are selling their cars so that they can get enough money to buy food to feed their family. And I said, well, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna build a bridge of trust. I want you to vet families. We'll do 20 to 50 at a time. I don't want to do 3,000. But in that vetting process, make sure that you are aware that they actually need the food. We'll come in, provide the food, but we're going to do this at the police academy, like in this case in the city of Irving. I want the police chief there, I want his officers there, I want my team leaders there, and I want all the barbers there. So as the families came through and we were all masked up and all, it gave the police an opportunity to say, here, we have boxes of food for 5 that will last for 8 days. We want you to take this. If you need anything, Chief Spivey would say, here is my card. If you have any problems at all, please call me. So this bridge of trust was built. Now, how does that help later on? Later on, in the height of COVID, and particularly when George Floyd was killed, there was a lot of unrest in the community. What did our barbers do? They called us and the police department and said, we need a meeting now. So about 60 of us met. All of the barbers came in. They had Black Lives Matter t-shirts on. They all sat in the back of the room. And then the chief came in, the mayor came in, the city manager came in, and the chief got up and said, the killing, first of all, should not have happened. This does not represent police. But I'm going to stay here, and everyone in this room and one community, we're going to answer all you questions. And if we have to stay here for 2 days, we will. My city manager is here and my mayor is here. And this Shop Talk program, you barbershop owners and beauty salon owners, I have told the city, you can get rid of anything in my budget. Do not get rid of this program. Now let's talk about what happened. We were there for about 2.5 hours. Those barbers then would be walking the streets later on with the police officers and
like
saying,
ambassadors.
Yeah, they were ambassadors, but it also tapping down any kind of unrest, because they said, these are our friends. We are working with them to build a safer community for you. Now you get on board and come into the Shop Talk program with us. This program has also been endorsed by NAACP locally, who is taking it to state, and we've already presented it to NAAC National. It is a way for barbershop owners in the minority-owned community, particularly the Black community, to have a voice, to be asked to the table, when in reality, in many cases, they are not. And it is a way to build trust and create unity.
It's connection. I must say, Matt, there's another clip I sent you, which is in between, doesn't have a title on it, but it's after the first one. But on the subject of barbershops, I worked on a campaign for a Black Republican who was running for Congress, and we were in his community. We're talking about, where do you go? Is a community represented by a Democrat, long-term Democrat in Congress? We were talking about where are the community centers where should we go? And one answer from him and many others was the barbershops.
Oh, that
everybody hangs out in the bar and they talk all day. They just hang out there.
So many of my team members, particularly one of them who was a former police officer and worked homicide for about 12 years, African American guy, he said the barbershop is where I went with my dad every single week. That's where I learned to be a black man. He said that is also where I learned the good, the bad, and ugly about what was going on in the United States. So for us, of course, we call ourselves the Switzerland of nonprofits because we represent the community as well as our first responders.
Yeah.
So integrating everyone together in programs that also reach into the community to help others creates ambassadors, it creates mentorships. We also identify, the barbers do, a young person who then is mentored by, guess what, a barbershop owner, a police officer, one of my team members. They help that person apply to an accredited trade school or a university. We pay the scholarship there rather than giving it. Sometimes you can't give a lot of money into a community. In some families, we would rather it go to the school. So the barbershop owners then become the heroes in their community.
Well, you know what else? All that you're doing, it humanizes the other. It humanizes if you're a citizen and you've just always been taught to distrust the police. It humanizes them. You're connecting. Okay, so Matt the Wonderful, in between the two we play, there's another little clip. If you could play that one, please.
This season, I've been taking you behind the badge and introducing you to extraordinary police officers and departments all over the country. Recently, we were invited to a special town hall meeting in Dallas, Texas, where city leaders and members of local and state law enforcement gathered, along with hundreds of members of the community, to discuss how to create trust and unity in this city.
We are at Concord Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. We're bringing two worlds together, our first responders and our citizens. And we're going to discuss the hard issues that many times people turn and run from.
It doesn't mean that one officer makes everyone bad, no more than it makes one black young man that committed a crime make all of us bad.
Okay, just the physical presence in that room, the physical presence of the officers and your team and community members just talking to each other. I mean, it's profound because it's connecting humanity.
It is profound, but we can't just talk. I was very grateful to Dr. Phil to send his crew there. Because it gave us a national exposure. We've been asked to take our programs to about 12 cities around the United States. The issues that are happening in Dallas, Texas are the same ones in Chicago and Baltimore and Atlanta, but again, it all boils down to safety. We can talk till the cows come home, and that's really where we need to move away from. Talking is good. It's actionable programs that have a positive effect on a community, not so much marching. I understand Black Lives Matter and all. I'm very grateful to them for raising the consciousness of America that Black Lives Matter, but we have to make sure that not all Black Lives Matter, but everyone in a community has a seat at the table to not only be heard, but also to get involved. That Shop Talk program we also take into what we call Una Comunidad, which is the exact same program, but in the Hispanic community. The Hispanic community many times feels that they are the forgotten ones. And so my team members obviously are bilingual. They work in the barber and beauty salon. So remember, it's not just male oriented, but in community centers and churches. So in each one of our 12 programs actually relate to each other. Our reentry program, which focuses on people coming out of prisons, half veterans and half general prison population, many times find their first employment where? In our barber and beauty salons. So
we're going to get to that one.
Okay.
I want to, and actually, quickly for our listeners, I meant to do this at the beginning, but and I agree what Tony's point was a moment ago about just talking. I mean, talking is a good first step, especially if you have no communication and you just have perceptions about the other side and don't have any basis of communicating. but just a quick litany of the areas in which her programs work. Program address needs education, health, reentry, second chance opportunities. We're going to play a clip in a moment about that. Military and civilian civic engagement, safety and citizen advocacy, evidence-based programs, engaging citizens with law enforcement, first responders. This is just it's so, I don't know where. It's so fundamentally American and human and healthy and normal to build a more connected community. But the next thing I sent to Matt, this program, I don't know why this about melts my heart, but this is a program among Toni Brinker's many programs, which is trying to help people re-enter society, either leaving the military or prison. We have a quick clip on that, and then we'll talk about that.
The program is going to help prepare ex-offenders, both military and civilian, for successful and sustainable re-entry into family, community, and the workplace. Self-improvement and mental health resources are available, along with housing and job assistance.
We've already seen in some of our programs our recidivism rate drop from 70% down to 22%. Well, we want to drive that down even into single digits. And our message is to the community, is that these people will be our neighbors again, and we want to set the table for success as best we can so they don't come back here.
Pathways to Hope is in partnership with nonprofit One Community USA.
And that is Toni Brinker's organization. So I would love if you talk a little bit more about that. Like you mentioned, the people get up, many of them find jobs in the barber shops and beauty shops that work with you. And so how's that whole process going?
Well, the whole thing is actually going quite well. Hats off to Sheriff Wayburn, because it took him about 20 minutes when I came over to him and I said, I have this great idea. I'd like to see if you would jump on board. So not only is his department, the Sheriff's Department, on board, but the Fort Worth Police Department is on board as well. What makes this reentry very different than others is a multitude of things, but one of them is that there's strong mentorship from the 40-hour prerequisite program that allows you to go into an 18-month-long program. But your mentors many times are first responders. So what about the officer that may be arrested dad? And dad has been in jail now for 5 or 6 years, and he is coming back out into society. He's missed a lot of life, okay? There's a lot of things that have happened. I mean, we've got people who are coming back and they've never even had a cell phone. When they went in, there was no cell phones. They're coming out and there's now cell phones. So how do you integrate back into society? So you've got to have the ability not only to have transportation and housing and a place to live, but you've got to have life skills. And if you have a mentor that walks with you that whole time, what if it were the guy that arrested you, who said, I want to mentor you? So now mom and the kids see the last person that they saw that took their father away is the guy who's now saying, I'm going to help your dad get reintegrated back into society. That changes the dynamics in a family, because in many of the prisons that I've gone to, we've said, well, you've been here for how long? Well, I've been here for 3 or 4 years now. Where's your father? Well, my father's over in the Estes unit over here. My grandfather's over here. So people that don't have some of the great opportunities that maybe you do or I do, they live in a world sometimes that is absolutely just beating them down beyond belief. We're there to help them, extend a hand and help them up. If I can do that and also have quantitative and qualitative data that shows that we are not only changing attitudes, like in Shop Talk, decreasing crime in that neighborhood when everyone comes together and police officers are going in and out of the shop, doing roll call or playing chess with the kids or reading with them, all of those things have a tendency to drive crime down. Back to reentry, we're also working on the post-adjudication side, which would mean that someone's coming back in and they're on paper, coming back out of to the real world. They're on parole. We now got a couple of judges who are saying, we like this program a lot, and if this person does complete this program, we will work with them on their parole. So you give them the life skills to come back into society, be an ambassador, work with the first responder, then you learn that safe neighborhoods only happen when citizens, first responders come together. There are no other groups that have to come together, those two. You cannot police a neighborhood safe without the help of the community, and the community cannot make itself without the help of first responders.
Toni Brinker, this is an amazing thing. Again, your program it was called Operation Blue Shield, now doing business as One Community USA. Last question for today. So you are hoping to build this in Dallas even more and then spread it around the country. Is that right? Tell us your vision there.
That's correct. I've got requests seriously to go to probably about 12 other cities. I've had governors who have called. So keep in mind that 2.5 years I spent talking to governors, AGs. I spoke to the Republican, actually, attorney generals, and said, you need to understand the power of law is integrated into these programs, but our goal is to create economic development, which is what everyone says. On the streets of Baltimore, people are angry that I've talked to and said, if we only had a job, if we only had better education. Well, what we have to do is start from within that community, bring people together by getting them involved. Then that change is sustainable. But all groups change. Law enforcement is changing. They know they need to change. So does the community. There's bad on both sides, but there's a lot of good on both sides. Bring the two together, you got a win-win for everyone.
I love that. Toni Brinker, thank you so much for coming in today. This was just great. Thank you.
My pleasure.